Dennis, whenever you're ready.
Hey everybody, hi, Dennis Prager from my home for the Fireside Chat this week. I only miss a Fireside Chat if I'm gone for a week, which happens periodically because I speak a lot. But I really consider this important, and we are getting a lot of views. Talking about views, I'd like to share with you something I only learned yesterday. It was published or put out by YouTube. They put out a listing of the most views on YouTube of any organization and of non-government organizations. Obviously, can't compete with the U.S. government, let's say. In the United States, Prager University, PragerU, has more views than any other non-governmental organization in the United States. I guess for last year, I guess it would be, or whatever their criterion of time was. The number one, the most viewed organization in America on YouTube is Prager University. And that, by the way, that it's more than any others that do serious things, social, political, whatever. That's a given. But it's doing more than all the animal ones. That's a big deal because those are the big competitors. In the world, we're number two, and it's a pet organization that's number one in the whole world on YouTube. And we have fewer YouTube views than we even have Facebook views. And YouTube has put at least 8 of ours, at least.
2 dozen.
2 dozen now?
Yeah.
Mind blowing. On their restricted list for sex and violence. You gotta search far and wide on PragerU for sex and violence. We may discuss sex and violence, but we don't have any. So there's a reason, because we care about quality, and that's the real reason. Before any of our videos goes up, you have no idea how many people it goes through and how many superb people are engaged in the writing, designing, editing, everything. So our hope is to go to 1 billion views within a year, because there's a lot that needs to be said. So anyway, I just wanted you to know that. I'm very proud of it, not in an ego way, but in an accomplishment of doing good, because that's all that matters in life, is you got to do good. So, hi again, and by the way, if you want to help us do this is all donations, because it's free. Everything is donation. So please help support PragerU and click on the donate link in this post. By the way, another thing, these Fireside Chats are not dated. So, while obviously this is happening now, the Fireside Chats of 2 months ago are just as relevant. Because even if they take a news item, which they usually don't, but even if they do, the ideas that I extrapolate from that news item are eternal ideas. They're not dated. As for example, my opening comments now before I go to your questions. I had a Fireside Chat without a fireside last week because it wasn't in my house with Glenn Beck. And we had a big difference of opinion on one matter, and I want to discuss that matter. And that matter was hating evil. I think there are many ways to divide the world, and one of them is those who hate evil and those who don't. Now, he's a wonderful man, so this is no reflection on him. There are good people on both sides. I don't believe that everybody I differ with is bad. Okay, that's a left-wing trait. If you don't agree with them, your six herbs: sexist, intolerant, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist, bigoted, and a hater, and all the other things, and a deplorable, and so on. But it is an important division, and it's something you should ask yourself. Because this is both emotion and morality. It is both. This is a very interesting question to ask yourself: do I hate evil? Now, by evil, I know people, oh, what do you mean by evil? And it so saddens me, that question. Like, is that complex? Can we all agree murder is evil? Not killing. There's non-evil killing. Self-defense, helping somebody who's attacked. That's why there are two different words in English for taking the life of a person: killing and murder. So, and that's why you don't say I murdered a mosquito. You say I killed a mosquito, because that's okay. It's non-okay, non-moral killing that's called murder, and it's only of a human being. Murder, rape, torture. Torture is a drop more complex, because in the most 99.99999% of the time, it is the greatest evil humans can engage in. But there's a 0.00001% of the time where I could imagine, and it's only imagining, it being moral, and that is if a person has planted a bomb, let's say by a dam, and if it explodes and the dam bursts, 100,000 people will drown. Can I break his arm to find out where the bomb is? I mean, if you say no, that's a very odd belief. So, but nevertheless, torture, rape, murder, okay, evil is evil. The North Korean regime is evil. I hate the North Korean regime. So I would ask those who think it's wrong, who will say it's always wrong or hate is always wrong, why? If love is right, then hate is right. The moral context is how you determine whether it's right. I love people who hate evil. And by the way, since I fully admit it, this discomforts a lot of people, which is sad. It wouldn't have 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300 years ago in America. Even in the colonies, because America's not that old. And that is, I do get my values from the Bible. And one of my favorite verses is, those of you who love God must hate evil. Now, I don't care if you're an atheist. That's a pretty powerful idea. That loving God, you can't love God if you don't hate evil. And I think that's true. I think God hates evil. What are you supposed to feel towards evil? Equanimity? If not hate, what are you supposed to? What response should you have? Nobody really asked it. Are you supposed to? I have no response, but I still want to vanquish it, but I don't hate it. Then what do you do with it? If you love kindness, how could you not hate evil? Evil is the opposite of kindness. So if you love X, then you have to hate non-X or anti-X, right? I think people have been brainwashed, truly brainwashed, by those who have said hate is wrong, hate is wrong, hate is wrong. It's usually the biggest haters who are in the anti-hate world. But anyway, why? Berkeley, I'll never forget, Berkeley, California, years ago, this is really a long time ago, it's about 15, maybe 20 years ago, announced that it was declaring, this is important, this is what the Berkeley City Council does. They declared Berkeley to be a hate-free zone. So I remember that, and I remember that I announced on my radio show, I can't visit Berkeley because I hate. If it's a hate-free, I hate evil. So I can't go. They don't hate evil, so they're okay. And the truth is they don't hate evil. That's the irony. The Berkeley City Council really doesn't hate evil. It hates people who hate evil. That's an interesting one for you to think about. But it's a real challenge. I'd like you to answer that. What are you supposed to feel toward evil, if not hatred? Now you say, well, hate the sin and love the sinner. Okay, I've never quite followed that. So, two guys who, I always think of these guys, two guys who went into a home in Connecticut about, 5, 8 years ago. There was a mother, a father, and 2 daughters. They raped the daughters, beat the father horribly with a bat, and murdered the mother. The father somehow escaped. And then they burned everybody. While the girls were still alive, they burned the house down. So what am I supposed to feel towards these guys? Love? See, I believe, this is another, I gotta do this. You gotta remember me, guys. I gotta do unconditional love one day. I'm opposed to unconditional love. By the way, the concept is relatively brand new. Google has a measurement of the use of terms in books. Before about 1910, it's a flat 0. The term was not even used. Then all of a sudden, starting in the 1960s, whoa, like a ski slope, became totally used. It's part of the silliness of the 60s. This notion that no matter what you do, you still get loved. My parents didn't even feel that to me. If I'd have gone out and committed mass murder, I don't think my father would have given me a hug. Dennis, I love you. No, God doesn't, by the way. That's right. God doesn't provide unconditional love. It's in the Old Testament. If you follow his ways, he will love you, and if not, then you are no longer his cherished people. That's what he told the Israelites. But anyway, I'll talk about that another time. Hating evil is a healthy moral and emotional reaction. So that's my thought on that. Now I'm going to go to your questions. Johnny from North Highlands, California. Dennis, with the news media hyperventilating over so many ridiculous stories, how are you able to tell which stories are important and which aren't? That is one great question. Well, one way, I follow my instinct on this, and my instincts are usually right. But now I have to try to flesh those instincts out. One way I'm thinking is, will the story be important a week, a month, a year, 10 years from now? So that helps ascertain whether something is important. If it's important today and it's not important next week, the odds are it's not important. I don't mean is it famous next week. That's a big difference. Never confuse fame and significance. But if it has, look, this story, this is a perfect story, okay? The family I just mentioned that was murdered in Connecticut, that's important today. It's not in the news today, but it is important today. I remember there was a fan, became the most hated man in Chicago history. Probably more hated than Al Capone. The guy who, I don't remember exactly, but do you guys remember?
Steve Bartman.
You even know his name, it's so sad. So he reached over and he grabbed a ball that would have been a home run.
Would have been caught by the Cubs.
It would have been caught by the Cub outfielder. Yeah. And they would have gone on, in the playoffs? They might have made the World Series. So the poor guy did what every fan does. They sit in the bleachers or first baseline, third baseline with a glove waiting to get a ball. This guy did it's instinct, right? It's just instinct. I want to catch a fly ball. So the guy was hated. Now, that's insignificant. It was unbelievably famous, but it's completely insignificant. So that's how you have to think of it. All right, Kyle from Denver. Hi, Kyle. Dennis, how does one distinguish a good cigar from a bad cigar in terms of quality and price? Also, how do I go about finding a good humidor that's not too expensive but will also last for a long time? Oh man, I could talk about this the entire fireside chat. I could with any of my fun things that I do. But briefly, first of all, how does one distinguish a good cigar from a bad cigar in terms of quality and price? If you like it, it's a good cigar. I can't tell you how important that is. Let me give you an example. I'm a big audiophile, means I love good sound because I conduct orchestras periodically. I'm very involved in classical music, and I love music very much. It's been my companion since high school, and I've always had great stereo equipment. So the question always arises, well, what's the best speaker? What's the best preamp? What's the best amp? And the answer is the one you like. And that's not a cute line. There is no such thing as best. In these areas, there may be best in some other things, but it's generally, what do you like? I've not found a consistency between price and tastiness in cigars, to be honest. That's why you just got to try them. The only thing I know for me is I like a full-bodied cigar. I do not get a headache. I get a headache from this amount of wine, and I don't get a headache from the strongest cigars made. Just the way people are built. So just know that. However, there are, I mean, if the cigar falls apart, it unravels, it's not well made. So that's an objective standard. But other than that, it's what you like. How do you find a good humidor that's not too expensive but will last a long time? I don't use I use humidors for decoration. They're gorgeous pieces of work, beautiful lacquered boxes. But for keeping my cigars humidified, I use $1 little balls that are put in little wrappers, or they're $2 types, and put them in just a regular, what do you call these?
The Bovita packs, like the
What do you call it?
The Bovita packs. And
Yeah, that's the brand name of the Bovita.
like
Yeah, but
bag.
but a regular bag that you a Ziploc. A Ziploc bag is the best humidor made. Just drop in one of these things. Then you can put them all in a humidor, so you have looks, because it's pretty ugly the other way, and effectiveness. David from Portland, Oregon, not Maine. Dennis, what is Judaism's view on obtaining salvation from the consequences of our sin? The Jewish view is based on the Hebrew Bible, specifically the first 5 books, the Torah, and that is God divides the world by behavior. You earn your way to heaven, you earn your way to hell. That is the Jewish view. Plain and simple. That is why non-Jews and atheists and pagans can go to heaven. And Jews can go to hell, even if they're believers. So that's the big theological difference between Judaism, normative Judaism, and normative Christianity. Okay. Stephen asks, Dennis, with regard to your point on expectations and images causing unhappiness, how do I keep my images realistic while at the same time not setting a goal that's actually too low? Here's the answer. I have an answer for you. Expectations and goals are completely separate items. You should have the highest goals in the world for yourself and no expectations. So, if you're a baseball player in the major leagues, your goal should be to go to the World Series. But if you expect to go to the World Series, you're setting yourself up for being an unhappy human being. My life is filled with the highest goals, but I have very, very small expectations. Jason from Fort Collins, Colorado. Dennis, who's your favorite character from the American Revolution? I don't know if I have a favorite. I mean, it's impossible not to have incredible admiration for George Washington. I mean, to be honest, he really was an extraordinary human being. But there were so many terrific folks from that time. The more I know about him, the more I get a big kick out of Benjamin Franklin, for example. But I think Washington was quite was almost touched by the divine. Edward, Dennis, in your opinion, what's the most heinous crime someone can commit? Well, again, I use my Bible as my answer, and it is the violation of the commandment of, it's called taking God's name in vain, but it really means carrying God's name in vain. As I explain, you could see it right after this at PragerU, where I give 5 minutes for each of the 10 commandments. And I explain that commandment is doing evil in God's name. So I know that's not exactly what you're asking, because you want to know what action. But let me just say, whatever the action is, if you do it in God's name, that's the worst. An atheist who commits murder and someone who murders in the name of God, the one who murder is horrible. But the one who has committed murder in God's name is worse than the atheist who commits murder. Because not only they both murdered people, but the one who's murdering in God's name, in effect, is killing God too. And that has terrible impact, because we need God, a good God, for moral guidance and justice. But what is the most heinous? Look, it's like a sweepstakes that you can't answer. Is it worse to gang rape a little boy or a little girl than to murder? Torture and murder is worse than just murder or just torture. They're all up there. But all things being equal, putting aside torture, because most people being tortured would rather be dead. So, I guess you could say in some senses that is the worst thing you can do. But putting that aside, murder is the worst thing, because you can't bring the dead back. It's permanent. Those who were hurt in other ways can theoretically recover, but the dead can't recover. Joanna from Atlanta. Hi, Joanna. Dennis, would you rather fight 100 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck? I wish I could speak to you, Joanna, because I want to know what prompted you to ask that. That's my first answer. Who thinks about this? But the other is this a standard question, or is this someone Joanna made up? It's hard for me to believe she made it up. It's got to have made the rounds somewhere.
There are variations on it.
There are variations on it, yeah. So this is an example of, it's not something I would think about. And that may be, in its way, disappointing, but that's an honest answer. There's so many real issues on Earth that those theoretical ones don't quite get me. Instagram user Catley Rob asks, Dennis, why does power tend to corrupt people? Oh, I have an answer for you. You know why? Because most people are weak. That's why. There are people whom power does not corrupt. But it corrupts most people because, most people who seek power don't want it in order to do good. They say they do. Everyone did. Right? Tell me a person who has ever sought power and said, I want power for me and not to do any good for the people. Of course not. But the people who seek power tend not to be impressive. That's one of the reasons I am anti-left. The left believes in power. The right, by definition, doesn't believe in power. It wants smaller government, so that means less power. I don't know why people find it noble to vote for people who say, give me more power. It's such an odd thing to me. In the abstract, everybody knows that's a bad idea. The more power you give people, the more it will be abused. And yet they still vote for people who love power. Well, what are you going to do? Instagram user Trey Parham asks, what's the best way to learn how to write? By writing. Write and write and write again. Read it. Have people critique it. If they're afraid that they'll hurt your feelings, then it's over. And my view is that writing is the mirror of the mind. You want to know how your face looks? You look in a physical mirror. You want to know how your mind looks? Write. Writing is almost literally the mirror of the mind. Then you can look at what your mind thinks. That's how you look at it. You write. And if you don't write clearly, it's because you don't think clearly. Writing is the best thing you can do to start thinking more clearly. That's it. Goes fast. I want to remind you again, look at other Fireside Chats. Visit our PragerU site, of course, and see our courses. And by the way, if you see a course and only watch it once, it's not going to stick. Repetition is the mother of pedagogy. Only by repetition can we learn anything. So see him, and it doesn't add numbers. I'm not saying this so we'll have more viewers. If you see it on the same computer 100 times, it's still one view. I'm talking idealistically. It's the best way to learn. And again, please help us out. Donations are tax deductible. It's the only way we can keep this stuff free and reach the staggering numbers that we are. There's a donate link in this post, so I appreciate it very much. Until next week, from my home to you, thanks for watching. I'm Dennis Prager.